Welcome dear audience, students and scholars. Here I'm Dr. Amjad Ali, dear scholars. So far as we have analyzed how an economy works under floating exchange rate and fixed exchange rate, let's consider which exchange rate regime is better. So in this video we are going to discuss should exchange rates be floating or fixed. So first we discuss the pros and cons of different exchange rate systems. Okay, the primary argument for a floating exchange rate is that it allows monetary policy to be used for other purposes. Under fixed exchange rate, monetary policy is committed to the single goal of maintaining the exchange rate at its announced level. Yet the exchange rate is only one of many macroeconomic variables that monetary policy can influence. A system of floating exchange rates leaves monetary policymakers free to pursue other goals such as stabilizing employment or prices. The advocates of fixed exchange rates argue that exchange rate uncertainty makes international trade more difficult. So after the world abandoned the Bretton Woods system of fixed exchange rates in the early 1970s, both real and nominal exchange rates became much more volatile than anyone had expected. Some economists attribute this volatility to irrational and destabilizing speculation by international investors. Business executives often claim that this volatility is harmful because it increases the uncertainty that accompanies international business transactions. Despite this exchange rate volatility, however, the amount of world trade has continued to rise under floating exchange rates. So the advocates of fixed exchange rates sometimes argue that a commitment to a fixed exchange rate is one way to discipline a nation's monetary authority and prevent excessive growth in the money supply. Yet there are many other policies rules to which the central bank could be committed. Fixing the exchange rate has the advantage of being simpler to implement than these other policy rules because the money supply adjusts automatically, but this policy may lead to greater volatility in income and employment. So in practice, the choice between floating and fixed exchange rates is not as static as it may seem at first. Under systems of fixed exchange rates, countries can change the value of their currency if maintaining the exchange rate conflicts too severely with other goals. So under systems of floating exchange rates, countries often use formal and informal targets for the exchange rate when deciding whether to expand or contract the money supply. So in real world, we cannot observe exchange rates that are completely fixed or completely floating. Instead, under both systems, stability of the exchange rate is usually one among many objectives of the central bank. So let's move toward the speculative attacks, currency boards, and dollarization. Imagine that you are a central banker of a small open economy. You and your fellow policymaker decide to fix your currency. Let's call it the pesos against the US dollar. From now on, 1 peso will sell for $1. As you know, have to stand ready to buy and sell pesos for a dollar each. So the money supply will adjust automatically to make the equilibrium exchange rate equal to your target. Okay, there is, however, one potential problem with this plan. You might run out of dollars. If people come to the central bank to sell large quantities of pesos, the central bank's dollar reserve might dwindle to zero. Okay, in this case, the central bank has no choice but to abandon the fixed exchange rate and let the pesos depreciate. Okay, here we have another possibility to rise, that this fact raises the possibility of speculative attack, a change in the investor perception that makes the fixed exchange rate tenable. Suppose that for no good reason the rumor spread that the central bank is going to abandon exchange rate peg. People would respond by rushing to the central bank to convert pesos into dollar before pesos lose value. So this rush would drain the central bank reserve and could force the central bank to abandon the peg. In this case, the rumors would prove self-fulfilling. Okay, to avoid this possibility, some economists argue that a fixed exchange rate should be supported by a currency board such as that used by Argentina in 1990s. A currency board is an arrangement by which the central bank holds enough currency to back each unit of the domestic currency. In our example, the central bank would hold $1 or $1 invested in a US government bond for every pesos. So no matter how many pesos turn up at the central bank to be exchanged, the central bank and would never run out of dollars. Okay, once a central bank has adopted a currency board, it might consider the natural next step. It can abandon the pesos altogether and let its currency or this country to use the US dollar. Okay, such a plan is called the dollarization. It happens on its own in a high inflation economy where foreign currencies offer more reliable store of value than the domestic currency, but it can also occur as a matter of public policy, as in Panama. If a country really wants its currency to be permanently fixed to the dollar, the most reliable method is to make its currency the dollar. The only loss from the dollarization is the seigniorage revenue that a government gives up its control over the printing press. So when this happens, the seigniorage revenue can never be gained by that government. Then this US government gets the revenue that is generated by the growth in the money supply. So here now we discuss the impossible trinity. The analysis of exchange rate regimes leads to a simple conclusion: you cannot have it all. To be more precise, it is impossible for a nation to have a free flows or free capital flows, a fixed exchange rate, and independent monetary policy. This fact, often called the impossible trinity. A nation must choose one side of this triangle, giving up the institutional feature at the opposite corner. So let's discuss the triangle of the impossible trinity. We have here three options. First is the fixed exchange rate, second is the independent monetary policy, the third is free capital flows. And we have here the three option. The first option is United States option, the second option is Hong Kong option, and the third option is China. Okay, while talking about the first option, it allows us to free flow of capital and to conduct an independent monetary policy as the United States has done in recent years. In this case, it is impossible to have a fixed exchange rate. Instead, the exchange rate must float to equilibrate the market for the foreign currencies or foreign exchange. And when we move to the second option, it allows us free flow of capital and a fixed exchange rate at the Hong Kong had done in a recent year. In this case, the nation loses the ability to run an independent monetary policy. The money supply must adjust to keep the exchange rate at its predetermined level. In a sense, when a nation fixes his currency, that of an other nations, it is actually adopting the other currency's monetary policy. When we move toward the third option, it to restrict the international flow of capital in and out of the country, as the China has done in previous years. In this case, interest rate is no longer fixed by the world interest rate, but is determined by the domestic forces, much as is in the case it is completely a closed economy, which we have discussed in our previous video. It is then possible to both the fixed exchange rate and conduct an independent monetary policy, but we cannot free our capital flows. So the impossible Trinity gave us some main option and conclusion. History has shown that nations can and do choose different side of the Trinity. So every nation must ask itself the following question. First, does it want to live with the exchange rate volatility? First option. Does it want to give up the use of monetary policy for purposes of domestic civilization? This is the second option. While talking about the third option, or it want to restrict its citizen from participating in world financial market. This was the third option. So the impossible Trinity says that no nation can avoid making one of these choices. So this is all about the option that country should use the fixed exchange rate or floating exchange rate. So see you with another video. Ciao.